Pedro from A&P-Reacts. I'm here today with Therese Lanz of Mares of Thrace to talk about the upcoming new record, The Exile, out March 25th on Sonic Union Records. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Well, first of all, thank you very much for taking the time to chat with me about the record. Another fellow Canadian on the channel is always a great thing to have more Canadians talking about music and making great music like you are.
Thank you. I'm biased, but I agree.
So let's start off by the starting point of this record. What was the creative starting point for you as far as The Exile is concerned?
Well, I had to move cities multiple times for work, and I felt pretty isolated geographically and otherwise, and I just felt I felt this sensation of being driven from home and not being able to go back, and those themes just kept popping up over and over as the years went by. And so The Exile is about exile. I suppose you could say.
It's pretty self-explanatory, I guess.
Yeah, and there's a lot of themes in it that unfortunately keep popping up in world history and certainly in modern world events of people being driven out of their homes and not being able to go back. And so it feels unfortunately appropriate for the times.
So when you're talking about this topic and you're creating the album surrounding this topic, when you listen now to some of the material, does it hit home still? Is there like an open wound there that the album perhaps helped heal, but not completely?
I think that's actually a really accurate way to put it. Like the wound never really closes, you know?
Yeah. Does that make it more difficult? Every time you have to sing a song, you have to kind of relive it. You have to reopen that wound.
Nah, music is healing always, and heavy music I find particularly healing and particularly therapeutic, I think.
Did you find some solace in this Exile, or was all negative?
I guess no, there was some upsides, like getting to see the world is never a bad thing, right?
Yeah, that's true. That's true. You look at every album as an opportunity to grow as an artist, like you set yourself goals in terms of what you want to achieve, or is there more of an organic approach behind each and every single one of them?
I think a little of both. That's a really good question. I'd say a little of both. Like each is just kind of like a snapshot of where I am in my head and where we are, like just as creators, as musicians at this point in time. But there's definitely specific things we set out to do. With this one specifically, I mean, there's a new drummer on this one, so I was very interested in seeing what a new collaborator could bring to the table. And then when we recorded it ourselves, like just at home, and that was also a new interesting experience, and I wanted to see what that was all about. And then I also kind of wanted to push myself like as a player and a writer this time around. Like, so it's definitely a bit more out of my comfort zone. It's a little bit more ambitious, I think.
Well, when you're constructing this album and you have all of that in your back pocket, are you looking at creating a little bit of a journey for the listener? Or is this an album that allows you to just create snapshots with each and every single song?
I think this one was definitely, especially as compared to the previous ones, this was definitely intended to be a bit of a journey, like a logical journey from one point, a little meandering, a little wandering for sure, but definitely a journey, I think.
Not a linear process, more of just kind of like enjoying the scenery, if you will.
That's another great way to put it, for sure.
Is this an album that sometimes you have to take 2 steps back before you take a step forward?
Maybe just because it's doom metal. You're going forward just very slowly.
That's exactly how I feel about it. Okay. Do you enjoy that aspect of it? Because I find myself really losing myself within it, and specifically with this album.
Thank you. That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I'd say so, for sure.
Now, when it comes to the process of creating a record like The Exile, is there something that you really enjoy from the moment you start to the moment you finish? And is there something that you absolutely hate? If you could outsource it to somebody else, you would totally do it.
Do you mean in the process of like recording or writing, or?
From the beginning to end, throughout the whole thing, the creative, recording, writing, everything.
carrying my gear up steep stairs. Like sometimes on tour we'll pull up at a club and they'll be like, and it'll be like on the third floor and there'll be a fire escape and they'll be like, okay, it's time to carry your 810 cabinet up there. And I'm just like, why couldn't I have just, I don't know, joined a choir or something? Other than that though, I mean, like every part of creating music, I find I love it, even the shitty parts, like even some of the shitty awful parts. It's just, there's nothing else quite like it, I guess. Just carrying those fucking amps upstairs, just that sucks. It's the worst.
Hey, you know, I have a big boy in this house that he's free of charge, and he's free in the summertime. So if you need somebody to carry those heavy amps, you know, just give me a holler and I'll send them your way.
I bet he'd be an amazing roadie.
I think he would be amazing, and I think he would love it. Do you look at a specific way of describing the sound of the band, and specifically the sound of this record? I know you mentioned Doom, but I honestly don't think Doom encapsulates everything that you created with the Exile. If you were talking to somebody who's never heard the band, who's never heard the album, how would you describe it?
It's tricky to say. I myself have never really managed to be monogamous to a subgenre, as it were. Like I like Doom, obviously. I've been listening to a lot of black metal lately. I've been listening to, I mean, stoner rock and stoner metal and sludge and noise rock are just all things that never really go away. But I have been getting more into black metal and then a little bit more into prog stuff. My new drummer is definitely a prog dude. That certainly leaked in there. If I had to, well, okay, this depends. If I'm describing us to somebody who I know knows about metal subgenres, I would say Doom with noise rock and hardcore leanings, probably.
What about if they don't know the metal genres?
I go
like your aunt who's visiting from out of province.
I'd say it's full of a lot of ooh.
I love it. I love that description. I think it's very accurate. It's very accurate. Now, all of these tastes that you have, I see them on this record. There's definitely a clear evidence of the influences that they drive the sound. Do you see this as an album that has a lot more diversity because of it?
I think this time around, I was just more concerned with getting what was in my head out of my head. Like, I think it was like I felt a little bit more free to be a little more experimental and a little more ambitious this time, just because like I wasn't saddled quite as much with expectations as I feel I was on the last one, which is it's a great place to be.
Yeah, it definitely gives you the freedom of not feeling like you're boxed in.
Yeah, for sure.
When you look at the debut record and you look at this album as an artist, how do you see your evolution?
I think almost anyone who is creative looks at their old stuff and goes, God, it sucks. What was I thinking? Maybe that's not entirely true. My old artwork, yes, but like I can still listen to that record and be like, all right, there's some riffs on this. Back in 2009, I had some ideas that were all right. But I definitely think this most recent one is the one I'm proudest of for sure.
What was the biggest change or improvement, if you will, on this record from the previous album?
Biggest improvement. It's tricky to say because it was so different. Like on the pilgrimage, like we actually flew to Chicago to record with Sanford Parker at his studio, and this time we just did it ourselves in our drummer's apartment. So there's definitely a different vibe there. In terms of improvement, I think the songwriting is just stronger.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this record is really well put together. I mean, if you didn't tell me that was recorded in an apartment, I would never guess, because it doesn't have that vibe. It's really well put together. And did you take a different approach vocally for this album? Is there something that you wanted to do differently on this record?
I did some clean singing on this record, which is not something I usually do. That's always a little scary because like it feels more vulnerable than it's also just it's a little more it at this point it just comes less naturally to me than screaming does. Also, after that many years of like after taking that big a hiatus off screaming like every couple of days, I felt a little bit rusty, and honestly it was a bit hard. I had to keep taking breaks and like eating greasy food between the takes. There's a free vocal tip for any like heavy vocalists who are listening to this. if you're feeling raw between songs, just eat something really greasy.
Yeah, you need to oil the pipes. It's like your WD-40.
Yeah, I got that tip. I got that tip from a Christian pop singer named Amy Grant, and she was absolutely right.
Wow, what a source. What a source. I love it. I love it. I'm glad you mentioned the clean vocals, because I really wanted to talk to you about that. I absolutely love them. Are we going to see more of them?
Thank you.
I thought it was, listen, I not to take anything away from the harsh vocals, because obviously I love those as well, but the clean vocals were just so different. It created such a yin and a yang that it just really brought the tracks to life. We need more of it. Are we going to get more of it?
Tell you what, Pedro, if you like it, I'll do more of it.
All right. I love it. Listen, I absolutely love it. A song like Offerings of Hand and Tongue, that is my absolute favorite track on the record. And the vocal dynamic of that song is outstanding, because it matches the dynamics that the sound has. The two is just like you're getting pulled in these two different directions. You don't know which way to turn. How did that song come to life? What was the birth of that track?
This that was a real that was one of the lower, like, but one of the sadder songs on that was just at a real low point in the past couple of years. And so that's like and I also, that's probably the most emotional one out of all of them. And like the extremes of like super quiet and then just super crushingly loud, but just bleak, I feel pretty much sums up what I was going for with the whole record.
Wow, that song is so powerful. I was so blown away, because you're taking me on these like really deep valleys of emotion where I'm just feeling like I'm sinking into it. And then suddenly you're like a defibrillator. You give me this jolt of the energy and I'm back up to life again. I was like, what the hell is going on with this song? I fell in love with it immediately. Like, it's just such an outstanding track, like I absolutely love it.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
I absolutely love it.
I hope you'll get a chance to get a physical copy, because there's a we made a little graphic novel. Like the liner is a graphic novel with a story that like accompanies the lyrics, and that's one of my favorite parts is that song. So
wow, interesting. So what's your comfort level? Are you more comfort with the mic in your hand or with a guitar in your hand?
Oh, definitely with a guitar. I always ended up doing vocals because nobody else wanted to.
You kind of just got put into the spotlight.
Yeah, but doing both at the same time is nice. But if I had to choose, I'd choose guitar.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You don't enjoy the vocal side of things? You don't enjoy being in the forefront? Or you just like the more introspective aspect of just playing the guitar?
I like it. Like, I like it fine. There's just a guitar in my hands has always just felt right,
More neutral.
Yeah. There's
So
also less pressure on not being the front man.
One thing we haven't talked about yet, and that is the lyrical content on this record. I know the album is very emotional. It came from a sense of isolation, and the lyrics obviously follow that. But how do you approach the process of creating lyrics? Do you allow the sound to drive the inspiration to the lyrics, or you're the kind of person that writes things down every so often? You have a little bit of a notebook of ideas.
Lyrics just kind of get like, it's almost like a seizure. It's the best way I can put it. I'll just be in a state about something. I'll be super pissed off about something, or super sad about something, or super frustrated about something, and the words will just kind of all just barf out of my fingers onto paper or a keyboard. In like lyrics, I usually only spend like they all get written in 5-10 minutes, usually how that happens. A seizure or like a lightning bolt is the best way I could describe it.
Holy crap, I thought it would be like, you're sitting by the sea watching the birds and then, with a piece of paper writing some ideas down. No, nothing like that. A seizure.
It's more like I read the news and I get really mad and the seizure happens.
Oh, wow. All right. Different approach, but it works for you. It definitely works for the sound that you created, because Some songs definitely, I mean, they didn't give me seizures, but they definitely made my mind like, kind of like explode as I was listening to it. One last question for you. How difficult it is to be a musician in Canada, specifically making this kind of music, something that's not necessarily mainstream?
Touring in Canada is brutal. It's really, really hard. I've toured up the coast of the US a bit, and having population centers 2 hours apart versus 10 hours apart is just, it's really, really difficult. And we still want to give the people on the, we still want to tour Canada, like it's still our home country, and it's really fun, but it's emotionally, or it's financially really punishing. And like, it's not now with the cost of gas, like I'm just cringing at the thought of having to tour Canada right now. In Europe, everywhere's so close together. So I'd say that that's probably the hardest thing about it. That and the fact that like you also can't tour for half the year just because there's snow and ice on the roads, and like it becomes a safety thing. That said, I would like to say that that adversity builds like sturdy, icy northern warriors who are like frostbitten and grim and true.
What about from a business perspective? Do you get any assistance from the government? Are there programs for musicians in Canada? I feel like, you know, as a country, we spend so much time and so much money and so much effort on things like hockey, and not to take anything away from hockey, you know what I mean? But I always feel like musicians in general, kind of, unless you're, you know, a Drake, you don't get the same sort of support. You don't get the same sort of love.
There actually are some really nice funding programs for the arts. Our record label, fortunately, has been consistently been able to tap into them to give us some extra support. I don't often, I know there's a lot of controversy about those grants and who they go to and why. And often they just end up, like Canadian content, like, are you familiar with CanCon, like Canadian content laws? I've heard a lot of people say that those just go to ensure Celine Dion gets played a lot. They don't help Vile Creature. They don't help Vile Creature get played a lot. I love Vile Creature, by the way. Probably my favorite Canadian band going right now. So I'd say it's a mixed bag, but I definitely think we're way better than some countries when it comes to public arts fundings.
So it's not all bleak.
Oh gosh, no, not at all.
It's not all doom and ice.
There's a lot of doom and ice, but I think Canadian heavy bands have consistently been among the best in the world. Again, very biased, but
I think you're right, and I think it's an emerging sport, if you will. That's not the right word, but you know what I mean. I think there's a lot more eyes on bands. Bands like Unleash the Archers definitely has helped put a little bit of a spotlight on Canadian bands, and Vile Creature is another great band. I think they're not that far away from where I live, so perhaps a stone's throw, if you will. But yeah, I just hope you guys have the support that you need, because the music that you're making is phenomenal, and as many people as possible should be listening to it.
Thank you so much.
I really appreciate you taking the time today. All the best. The album comes out March 25th, The Exile. The band's name is Mares of Thrace. I absolutely loved this record. You guys did a phenomenal job on this album. Great sound, great grit. It definitely packs a punch.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you.